Hello, friends, family, and keepers of the faith, to another Del Boy blog. This one is year 2 blog 28, or if you want to look at it in legacy numbers, it's blog 80, and the date is the 3rd of September 2023. So we're now in September. As I mentioned last week, that's the sort of like last week where you were on summer holiday, you were going back to school. The weekend that we're in at the moment would probably be the time where you'd be going with your mother downtown to get the school uniform, get a new bag, buy all of those bits of equipment like protractors, compass, little lead pencils, pencil end toppers, all that sort of stuff when you were going up to secondary school. Or if you're going a little bit later on, you'd be moving from school to the big school, the upper school, which is, what would that be? That would be like the 4th year of secondary school. And you'd be looking forward to going to that school without having a school uniform. Yeah, weird times. But as I mentioned last time, I always tend to find this week to be the week where you could have good weather. Sort of like that term that I don't know is good or not, but we used to call them Indian summers, where the good weather was around for just a little bit more, and then in a couple of weeks' time, tipping it down, and the autumn is here, and it won't be too long before we're at winter. But we won't dwell on winter, will we? Been a bit of a weird week, being as I've been on break. I wanted to get a lot of things done. I haven't, although I have in a way. This week coming will be more focused on my mother and then me second. I need to get prepared to go back to work. I need to make sure that the garden is in good shape. My mother is not well. She's been unwell now for a couple of days, which has got me down a little bit. So I'm hoping to cheer her up this week. Hopefully she'll be a little bit better for me to take her on a little car journey, say. Get her out of the house, get her out this doldrum. And lots of things like that are planned. I'll talk a little bit more about what things for me later on, but we'll start as we always do, which is the news. And remember, the news is just a date stamp. It's a date stamp, so anybody that goes back to these videos, in several months or in several years' time, they'll know exactly what was going on in the world, and therefore you can probably understand the mindset a little bit more. So we start off as we always do with the war. It's still going. I wrote down this because it was sort of like semi similar to a hobby of mine, which is film. So it read like this. The film, The Witness, the first propaganda film to come out of Russia, has opened to mostly empty cinemas and is now considered a flop. It opened 2 weeks ago and cost 1.5 million and earned 110,000 in its first 2 weeks. A film goer who was inquisitive about the film said he was the second of 2 people in the cinema, and they came away thinking, we see this every day on TV, in newspapers and billboards. Do we need to spend our own money to see more? ? Hopefully the takings tell them how we feel. That was an interesting article. Less about bombings, people dying, hospitals targeted, nuclear stations getting cracks, and worrying whether we're going to have nuclear fallout and so forth, to a more straight-laced what's going on with the Russian people and what's happening in their lives while this Ukraine war is going on. And it talked a lot about propaganda. So interesting. I thought that was quite good. I hope um, that they've learnt their lesson possibly a little bit. There will be films later on this conflict, just like we've had with World War films, army films, all that sort of stuff. This one seems to be about a violinist or something that was going to a concert when the war broke out, and shows lots and lots of Ukraine incidents that never occurred, where the Ukrainians were shooting Russians in the head and all sorts of stuff. Sounds to me a very disgusting film. But hey ho, The Witness, who knew? There's been lots of stuff. So we moved to the UK stuff now, and there's been lots in the in the news. But of course, I haven't been at work, so I haven't been listening to the news as much. But the ones that come to mind are the moon this week. I wrote this down. Blue supermoon occurred on Thursday, 31st of the 8th, 23. The phenomenon won't occur again for 14 years, 2037. And let me be straight with that one. The phenomenon will happen before 2037, but not two in the same month. Okay, just before I get any corrections. This phenomenon occurs when the moon is 222,043 miles away, where it's normally 252,088 miles away. So the moon is actually it's closest to the Earth. Based on that, you get a big moon, plus our own atmosphere alters the color spectrum slightly. Although colour has nothing to do with why it's called a blue moon. The reason I bring it up is I love to see photographs, and I knew straight away when this was in the news. Everybody plus everybody plus anybody who's got a camera, a phone, or whatever was going to go into their back garden and take photographs. Nothing wrong in that. In fact, I had some new friends that I've befriended that took photographs, and they were gorgeous, absolutely lovely. And I love it when people are trying to do different things with photography. They're learning about exposure, how light works, how long you have to keep a shutter open to get the correct exposure to the film, or in this case, the digital part of the process. So it was very interesting. It's just it went on and on and on. I saw it on every news broadcast at the end. Like I'm waiting for the TV to come on. The programs. It'd be the last segment in your local news. Then it'd be on the national news. That would be on at 6 o'clock and 9 o'clock and 1 o'clock. So by about 2, and then when of course the next day comes along and the weather's going to be a bit better, they all do it again the next time, and then of course more photos come in. Just calm down and just love some of the stuff that people are doing. It's just I think it was overload for me. My God. Saying that, I did it myself the second night. I didn't do it the first one. But I wanted to try out a new lens that I had on my camera. So it just gave me the opportunity to just test that, really. Other news events is more local to schools, where we found that certain schools that have been built over the years, we found that they used a type of concrete that is not safe. I can't remember the name of it. I didn't research it. It's come to mind just now. And there's about 100 or so schools that have shut down at the moment, and they're having to go back to school next week, probably in porter learning establishments. Like little huts that are constructed at Fast. The stuff that you use at Glastonbury. While their surveys are going on, and then reconstruction as needed. Now, what they mean by reconstruction is the tearing down and bringing back up with the proper materials. But the big all-encompassing question is, how much is that going to cost and who's paying for it? Will it be down to the local budgets of your council? Apparently, it is going to be government funded. Let's hope that that happens quickly. But of course, it does mean where is that money going to be coming from? Again, something that will hit us probably later on. And I'm just going to have a little bit of drink because I spoke all very quickly on that. Oh, that's nice. Oh, right, yeah. So I've gotten into the habit of using filtered water and putting it into these water canisters. And then somebody stated that you can buy these little, well, they're like little containers with a flip top. And you squeeze it once and it jets some like cordial into your bottle. And then you turn it upside down, mix it a little bit. And you've got very low sugar, slight taste of fruit in your water without having to overdo it with guessing how much cordial you need to water and all of that. You just squeeze it till it discolors, so that's you can see it's very pale. I haven't used too much on it, and it was because I was drinking lots and lots of water the last 2 weeks and it got a bit boring. So for somebody who's been drinking cans and cans and cans for a long time, it was just time for me to mix it up a bit. So there we go on that. Very nice, really. That's the news out the way. We're on target, I think. So we'll get to the shout-outs. As you know, I love to do the shout-outs. The shout-outs mean a lot to me because it means that people have actually wanted to know how I am, how my mother is. And then also there'll be the odd question and there'll be some feedback, it was interesting that you mentioned this. This is my interpretation of that question, etc., etc., etc. Sometimes they don't come across like that. Sometimes it's, no, what you talked about is not that, it's this. I think we have to remember with a question is when it's aimed at you, you don't want to go off too much in tangent, and you answer it in the way that the question was done. I don't go in too much to say you're wrong, you're using the wrong word for the question that you're asking. I answer it as best as I can in the way that it was structured. So just bear that in mind. So the shout-outs this week, and salute to all of these, they are Martroid, Colin Jones, aka Ponder, Wee Bob Art, Jambon, Ian Hill, The Ramblings, Steve's Gaming, Seb's Place, David Retro Games Played Badly, Colin Thompson, Danny Jukes, a new one, Zero the 14th Retro. Welcome to the channel if you're watching again. The Bad Lieutenant, brilliant. I've spoken to him a number of times in other chat channels. Ian Batchelor and Paul Patrick. Now, if I've missed anybody, apologies. But I put out more output this week. So I don't know if you noticed, but normally I'll do a blog and possibly one other quirky thing. After my blog came out, I did a Pinfest walkthrough. Then I did a Pinfest gameplay. Then I did got one of my statues out and discussed that statue. And that was really for the benefit of Down the Rabbit Hole, who encouraged me to start talking about some of my action figures or other memorabilia, because he also does that himself. He does it with his Star Wars memorabilia. And I thought it was a good idea. I might start doing a bit more of that. And then, of course, I wanted to play a game, bought one, and did a random gameplay video. So you can imagine my output has been a lot more this week because I'm off work. and that means I've had to go through those to see if there are any names and comments in there. If I miss anything, apologies. It's interesting to note the more I put out, the less views I got. That was interesting. And just what I predicted, and it happened this morning, Pinfest video walkthrough has got now more views than the blog last week. To be quite honest, Pinfest last year, over a year's worth of views, has still got the most views I've ever had for a video that I've ever put out there. But it's not really surprising, that is it? Really, when you consider all these people would have gone to an event, they would have put in their search engine when they got home Pinfest, and they would have seen all these videos, and they then click through them to see if they're in the crowd when people are doing walk rounds or just reminiscing about the event. So it's not surprising, really. But thanks to all those people that did their shout outs, and we'll move swiftly on to questions because we're doing pretty well at the moment. These are in no particular order. I do thank all the people that have left a question. I tried to read out as many as I can. I am going to start going back to answering these as text as well, because I've got time this week. I've found the last 6 to 7 weeks that the hardest time for me to not only do work and keep my mother happy, but also to do YouTube. It's been a real balancing act. But it's been really enjoyable because it's kept my mind occupied. Oh my God. There have been less times where I'm dwelling on things. This week has been the week where I've dwelled a lot more. And it's been hard. I will say that being on holiday is, again, for a long period of time, 5 days, has been difficult because when there have been the low moments where it's silence, like in this room, no telly on, I've naturally gone back to the state of thinking too deeply about things, and it can change your demeanor a little bit. But anyway, we'll go past that for a moment and we'll answer some questions here. And the first one, and these are in no particular order, they're just on my screen at the moment, is from Robert's Retro Gaming. And he's put, "Hi Del, another week of watching you in bits and pieces. But I did get through. It's like watching a feature film each time." Must be the low production feature film. That's all I've got to say about it. The nice thing about it, though, Robert, is you're watching. That's the important thing to me, to be remembered. You know, that legacy thing, and to pop back every now and again and see if that person is still around and still living and still doing that thing. If it's addictive, great. If it's not addictive, I understand. The whole point of this is to leave a bit of a legacy behind for my family when I'm past. So anyway, Time Bandits is a classic. I loved it when it came out. It's a bit of an odd one, but I think it holds up reasonably well. Yeah, Time Bandits. Terry Gilliam directed thing. I remember seeing it as a kid and not really understanding it. I got the humour part of it, mostly. But it was Brazil that woke me up to Terry Gilliam's directing. And that one, to me, is the one that stands out of all of his films. Maybe I haven't watched enough of them, but going back to Time Bandits reminded me of Homemade Films. That's the company that produced it, I think. And it's that British manic humour that I think a lot of the world wouldn't understand. Like, there's a lot of American humour that we have over here, and we go, just don't understand. You're talking politics, don't understand your politics, etc., etc. There is some quirky English humour in here that would bring out some slang as well that people will not understand unless you live in England. So it was an interesting time, that film, very interesting take. But like you, I think it did all right. Anyway, question for you. Did you ever play Omnitrend's Universe? I was obsessed with that one for a while in the mid-80s. Omnitrend's Universe. Oh, now you'll have to remind me here, Robert. This was an Atari only game, and I think it was disc only. Yes, my friend had it. That's right. He noticed that I still had an Atari 800, bought himself one, and bought. Now you'll have to correct me here, but he didn't buy Omnitrend's Universe. It was called Universe 2. Was it Universe 3? Anyway, it seemed to be an elite type game, very heavy on the text, with little stickmen when you were at the space stations and things, and you would trade and go off and do some space things. I liked what I saw, if I remember rightly, but it was slow. But then I think the intention is that it needs to be slow. It was one of those long, deep games. I never had it myself. I think I remember going, I wouldn't mind that on the Commodore 64. I think it was damn expensive. That was the reason it wasn't over here much. In fact, if at all, because it was my friend who had it was an American, so he got his stuff off the BX Center on the base, the American Air Force base. So yeah, I just about remember it, and I'll tell you what it is. It's that word omnitrends. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I know the one you're talking about. Hope I've given that a good description. I must admit I was more into my elite and all of that sort of stuff. But anyway, salute to you, Robert. Thank you very much. As you know, I'll mention what you've been doing a little bit later on. I have been watching. And we'll move down to the next one, which is my mate Denny. Here we go. How many sheets of paper did he write this one on? Okay, it starts. Hiya, Dell. Hope you're enjoying your break off work. Time to enjoy your interests and kick back for a bit. Enjoyed our chat. Been a long time since we've done that. Yeah, we had a chat this week. Interesting. And many topics raised again, which is the thing that I like. It spurs me to think of things and then adds into my blog. Because we talked about, again, some kiddies TV shows, and then we started talking about theme tunes again, and then it started a discussion about clapperboard and screen test, and that's where it started off with two kiddies programs, the theme tunes that came out. And I remembered a couple of other ones which I played back to him, and he went, "Oh my god, yeah, forgot all about that. That's another one I've got to add to my TV themes list." And yes, this is where we go off in tangents, and it's great when that happens because it sparks that brain again. So we move on. I remember my 6 weeks holiday spent with my nan over the summer. The Adventures of Robinson Crusoe, Why Don't You, The Banana Splits, and many, many more programs I used to watch. Memories are a wonderful place to visit when times are not so good. They never fail to pick me up. Yes, and I've mentioned it before, haven't I, Denny? Robinson Crusoe, what a fantastic episodic program that was. The Banana Splits, who can not remember as a child, if you were born in the 80s, the Banana Splits that we would have grown up in the 70s. The Double Deckers is another one. You know, and many, many more, like you say. They all had a little cartoon in the middle as well. I think there was one in the Double Deckers that was like Tales of the Arabian Nights. And you had a donkey and you pulled its tail and it turned into a whirlwind. Was that in the Banana Splits or was that in Double Deckers? Can't remember. But it was a cartoon and I remember that. You carry on. Great to see you so active on YouTube. Really enjoyed the pinball videos. one of those videos that transported me back to a time when I was younger, when me and my old man used to play a little pinball and air hockey in the late 70s and early 80s. Yeah, I remember air hockey an awful lot. And the closest I could get to air hockey at home was Crossfire, the board game with the little gun and the marbles, and you fired at a puck. But air hockey was great. I used to love air hockey. I don't know why I'm doing these hand signals. Um, where where there was a sort of like a blast of air that was going just above the table. The little plastic puck would therefore glide, and you would use your hand um, paddle, as it were, to smack it at angles to knock it off the edges of the court and go behind the person that was doing something similar. Yeah, I loved it. That was brilliant. Great look at the vulture statue. I'd be interested to know if you have a Dr. Octopus. now, now you're talking. I've got lots of Bowen statues, and I've got close to 100. Dr. Octopus is a grail, just so that you know. It came out, there were 750 of them. It was, at the time, the most expensive Bowen statue that came out, where I mentioned in the video they cost between $30 and $175. The Dr. Octopus, if I remember rightly, was a 200. And if I want to have Dr. Octopus now, I can have it in fantastic shape if I'd like to spend $1,300 on him. Or I can have him in not too bad shape. The tentacles have got some chipping paint and all of that. And that would be for a lovely, low cost, $800. $800 I am not prepared to pay for. Dr. Octopus has been redone by other studios that cost around about that same money, but are far more detailed. It would be lovely to have it. And the reason for that is the Bowen statues came out in what they call phases. Phase 1, Phase 2, Phase 3, Phase 4. And they did what they call a Spider-Man Rogues Gallery. And in that Rogues Gallery, there was the Scorpion, Mysterio, Dr. Octopus, Electro. It goes on. Some of those made up the characters called the Sinister Six, which is something that Sony have wanted to make a film of for years, where you've got 6 enemies all wanting to beat the crap out of Spider-Man. And it was the very first annual in the comic. So in 1963, the first annual came out, drawn by Steve Ditko, written by Stan Lee, and it was called The Sinister Six. Fantastic book. Rogues Gallery of villains. Had the Sandman as well, Craven. And so, wouldn't it be great if you had the Spider-Man statue, which is a museum piece, it's called a museum stance, and you had all of the Rogues Gallery behind him, going, encompass him sort of like in a half semicircle. Dr. Octopus would therefore be one that you'd want, and unfortunately, I will never probably have that one. Shame. Moving on, because I probably bored the pants off of everybody with that, but thank you for that. Loved it when you brought up Clapperboard with Chris Kelly. I think you mentioned to me you were on about Screen Test, whose theme, Marching There and Back by Sid Dale, is extremely memorable. Yes, again, we move into the theme was just as important as the TV show back in the day. I haven't got it as a recording to play now, but go and look that up. It's a fantastic marching band piece. And it's Screen Test that I was talking about, yes. Great news about Disney releasing physical media again. Let's hope it continues. Yes, I've been looking very closely, and none of these releases have been released in the UK, but one of them is now out in the States. It's a to be announced for the UK. So the news might be just for America. And if it is, again, Disney are not listening. So I'm keeping my eyes peeled. I met Sylvester McCoy at Monopticon, Manchester, way back in the 90s when John Pertwee was still alive, and he attended too. Yes, I've been to a number of Doctor Who events. I've met a number of the Doctors. I've got no pictures of me with Patrick Troughton, sadly, but that really was a memorable day for me, being he was my favourite Doctor. But I have met Colin Baker. I've met Tom Baker. I'm trying to think now. I haven't met Sylvester McCoy. No, I don't know. No, I haven't. Peter Davison I've met. Yes. So I think Colin Baker, Peter Davison, Tom Baker, and that's it. John Pertwee and Patrick Troughton are the ones that I've met. I haven't met them all, you see. Haven't met any of the new ones. So that's going to have to change, isn't it? They've been around now for quite a few years now, so you might as well call them canon. Finally, I watched your video on Spirit Hunters, the latest Vampire Survivors game. After watching other videos, its depth for me is way above Army of Ruin and Time Wasters. The introduction of the Path of Exile skill tree is fantastic. I'm so glad that you've done that. I wanted to buy a game to play that day. I thought it would make a good video to do. It was a Vampire Survivors game, no brainer. It was very cheap, bought it, and I wanted to come across not negative about something, like I've done possibly too much. And it was great to put that on and play it. I enjoyed it. I didn't think that it was quite as good as Army of Ruin and Time Wasters, and here we are. You've done a bit more research, and it seems like I could be in the wrong. And this is where playing a game once and then hitting the record button on a video is probably not wise. But you do get my first impression of it, and it's not influenced by anything I've listened to or watched. That's the point. So I will go back to that. I've loaded it twice, and that's because of another game that I've just downloaded, which was whoppingly huge, and a lot of people have been playing it this weekend, and I'm pretty sure people know what that game is. But for those who are not, it's Starfield, which is a space exploration role-playing game by the team that brought out Fallout, Skyrim, those sort of games. And even with that, I've only played a couple of hours. And we might talk about that a little bit later on what my impressions are with that. Okay, my question for this week. What are your favourite films and TV productions by the late director Tobe Hooper, and why? Oh, wow. Now, it's funny, but I had a conversation last night with my friend Rock God. And we were chewing the cud about how the chats are going in films and all that sort of stuff. What are the things we don't like chatting about because they've become boring or stagnant or whatever? And that's the sort of question that we don't find boring, but what I don't like, Nigel is a different beast altogether, is the constant bashing of Marvel. Because you can love them or you can hate them, but to have a 40-minute rant every single chat time that there's a chat video going on, to keep bashing them, it just gets boring. I mean, there's nothing new that is being mentioned on why, that's not the thing that that you're into when it comes to film. So to keep mentioning it just means, well, it just becomes stagnant to me. And this in a recent chat, and it didn't ruin the chat at all. Don't get me wrong, and it could have been my own demeanour where I was dwelling too much on things. Where I watched it and went, "This is a 40-minute rant on Marvel. Why can't we move on to horror? Why can't we move on to comedy? It's the same thing I'm listening to, and it's the same arguments. So where do you go with it? Do you know what I mean? To keep bringing it up, just boring now." But we'll talk about all the streams and things I watched a little bit later on. Thank you so much, Denny. Some fantastic stuff there. And we'll move forward now. Salute to Denny, and we move to Paul Patrick. And it says, "Hi, Dell. Hope you're enjoying your well-deserved time off. In terms of pinball, what would be the one pinball machine that you would buy if money and space was not a consideration? Also, do you have any recommendations for good pinball games on the consoles or PC for noobs? I had Pinmain set up on a PC years ago. I remember it being quite a faff to get it all to work." What a great question. First of all, I have to turn around and say pinball is something that's always been in my life, but has always been a distant cousin to anything to do with video games, because video games to me was my thing, right? Pinball was great, but there's only so many times to see a ball go down the gutter or hit a flipper switch or whatever before I was sort of like going, a bit bored now. You know what I mean? It seemed you had a bit more maneuverability to variety, I think, with video games. That being said, I have to have I have to turn around and say there is a nostalgia to pinball, because that word nostalgia is a memory, a feeling, a knowledge, an image, a sound, a smell that brings back that one topic, pinball. And so there is. I remember seeing them in cafes. I remember seeing them in sport halls. I remember seeing them in pubs. I remember seeing them by the seaside with all of the arcade games. So, of course, I have a nostalgia for them, because as soon as you put a coin in, you've got to have a nostalgia, because it'll be the first time you played on a pinball game. Look at it like that. So, is there one pinball table? I think I mentioned it in there. It would be the Twilight Zone. Hands down, the one machine I would love. But a very close second would be a very, very old edition of Spider-Man, which was done by Gottlieb, and it was done late 70s, early 80s, so about 1981, could possibly have been 79 or 80. And it had, the board art was done by John Romita Sr., who's my favourite artist, and people know that from other blogs, and they also know that he died this year. So the Gottlieb Spider-Man pinball for definite. Twilight Zone, oh my god, yes. If you want to know the prices of the Twilight Zone in good condition, no blemishes, no problems with it, you're looking at $14,000. If you're happy to have one with problems, you know, like the magnets are starting to go, the ceramic ball that's in the gumball machine has started to play up, some of the flipper tricks are now starting to not work because of worn parts, then you're looking at 8,000 and above. And when you look at it from that point of view, you'll probably recognize when I was doing my walkthrough, when I walked past Twilight Zone, I turned around and said, one day when I've won the lottery. And no kidding when it comes to that particular pinball table. And I looked, as soon as I get nostalgic about something and I look on YouTube, and a lot of my YouTube would have been looking at pinball tables, I looked at the history of the Twilight Zone pinball table being made. It's a 15-minute short on YouTube, and to be quite honest, explains that it was like the 5th best-selling pinball table for over 5 years. That it was it manufactured the most amount of tables at its time, which was like 15,000 units, just under. The most expensive table made as well. With piracy protection, where you can't sell it in another district. Weird, that bit. So hopefully that encourages you to go out there and look for that. It says here also, do you have any recommendations about good pinball games on the consoles, PC, or for noobs? Obviously, if you go to Steam, there is the FX games, the FX Pinball range. I think there's FX Pinball and FX Pinball 3. And those aren't bad, but I do think that they do this thing where you buy them in packs or tables, and they're usually quite expensive. And if you move up to the new engine, so we've got one called Pinball FX and then FX3, you're buying the tables again for the new engine, and they don't look that radically different, but they're the same price. Now, I have a big argument about that, because you should be able to transport your tables across, in my opinion. So that's about the talking of the Steam's stuff about pinball. There are many more, by the way. There's some ones where you can actually create your own arcade building, and you can control what arcade games go in it and what pinball games are in it, and walk virtually around it and play the games. Down the Rabbit Hole's got a perfect one of those, and I encourage you to look at that. But when it comes to PinMain, yes, I was the same. When Main came out and I heard that PinMain was something, I downloaded PinMain. And it got a bit complex, because I recognised that no matter what you do, even in pinball, there are what they call ROMs, which control the board and a lot of the sounds and so forth that's going on. But they also needed a table that was drawn in 3D, the ability to move the table around to any point of view. Lighting became something as well, and then there's the physics engine. So not only were you buying the table, you were buying the back glass to the table, which was the secondary monitor at the top. Then there's the scoring system, which was like a JX board, like the type of boards that you'd use when you go to the doctor's surgery about 10 years ago, where they called your name and you came up in dot matrix characters, ticker-taking along. They were lit like that. That's what those pinball displays are like. And when you consider that all of those required plugins, it was a faff. Now, I found out that PinMain is actually dead now. It's now called VPX, or Visual Pinball X. And it's very, very simple, and it incorporates PinMain. In fact, PinMain is actually a folder within the VPX engine. So, just to step back a little bit, it takes about 15 minutes to set up now. You need to register on 2 particular websites. I think one's called VP Forums and the other one's called... No, I'm not going to remember it. So there's no point me looking either. All you have to do is type in VPX, and you'll see that there are lots and lots of sites for you to go to. However, you register on these 2 particular sites. You download the installer. If you're unsure which one to install, choose the largest one. The largest one is only large because it's got language packs, and it won't install those language packs if you don't want them. So the safest one to install is the largest one. You then download any betas and copy over the top of the installation that you've done. That's important because certain tables will have only been written in this last year, and therefore they will not work in the engine now, because they were written on a newer engine. So it's always best to have the betas on top if possible, even if it's unstable. You then go to another site, and that's where you can get the ROMs and the back glass from. So you download the table and the emulators from one site, you download the ROMs and the back glass, and the pop-up add-ons from another website. And all you're doing is copying those files into folders. So if you see that there's a folder in the table called music, all you're doing is you're going into the music folder and copying it into your emulator's music folder. If you've then got a table that you've downloaded and it's got the word table in it, and you open up your zip file, you just copy that into the tables folder. See where I'm coming from. The ROMs go into something called pinmame/ROMs. So you go into the pinmame folder, then you find a folder in there called ROMs, you go into there and you copy the ROMs into there. You then don't open the emulator, you double click on the table itself. When you double click on the table, it opens up and you are ready to play pinball. And it uses the same mechanic as pinmame did. 5 to put a coin in, 1 to actually start the machine up, 2 shift keys left and right for left and right flippers, arrows or return keys to control the ball being projected into the main playfield, etc, etc, etc. You got tilt and point of view and all of that sort of stuff. So to recap, Steam, FX and FX3, outside of Steam, VPX or Visual Pinball X. And don't be put off by how complex it is, because it's not. You just need to be savvy that when you open up a table and it's got some other files in there, all you're doing, you're dropping those into easy to understand folders already in your setup, i.e. you put music in music, tables in tables, ROMs in ROMs. Not difficult. Okay? Very simple. Definitely recommend everybody do it if you're ever remotely involved in pinball. The nice thing to me about pinball is, unlike MAME, where I want every ROM for every arcade machine out there, when it comes to pinball, I only want the tables that I'm interested in. So they take up less space. So, recommendation. Maybe it'll appear on the Mister, who knows? But at the moment it's a Windows emulator. I haven't seen a Linux version. So, if it does turn into Linux, it could be on the Mister. Yes, I'll have a look at that. In fact, I haven't thought about it. Colin is now bound sure to be going, oh, I'm going to tell him. So I'll look for that reply from Colin next week. That's just my little joke. Okay, thank you so much, Paul. We'll move to Steve's gaming. Oh, Steve, we have to have my salute to Steve. Steve, my salute. Up your arms. Salute. Right, there we go. I'll have to think of a tune there. You're going to have to do one like the Three Amigos, where you go. Ugh. Anyway, we'll think of one. Hi, Dell. Great one again, and I enjoyed your other videos on pinball and that figure unboxing. Now, 2 questions for you. Bloody hell, that was quick. Bloody hell, 1 line? Jesus, you talk for England, man. What's that 1 line nonsense? Anyway, here we go. What was the first game that hooked you so much that when you stopped playing it, you were thinking about it and couldn't wait to play it again? 2, did you ever stay up all night playing a game? If so, then what was the first game you played all night? First time I did it was way back in 84, 85 with Elite. Take care and love to your mum. Well, you've answered the bloody question, to be quite honest, and anybody of our age, Steve, is obviously going to mention Elite. But let me see if I can think of another one. Yes, I can. There was a game around about the same time as Elite, but done in a totally different presentation to Elite. And it was called the Sci-Fi Trading Company. I remember that coming on disc, and I used to love these little alien character animations that were in the corner. It was not Elite. Elite was wireframe, dogfighting, going to worlds, all of this. This was a trading game, solely really on trading, and there were pirates that were trying to get your stuff, and there were some conversations that you had where you had multiple choice answers, much like we do today, even in Starfield. That comes to mind. That I did play all night once when I was younger, but my playing all night really happened when I was older, you know. And Guild Wars is a happy time where I can turn around to you and say, look, I discovered massively multi online role playing games, and all of a sudden I'd created a character and I was going around a world that was beautiful in its construction and getting involved in the story and moving from section to section of this world and leveling up. And that was the adrenaline that wanted me to play all night. And all of a sudden I'd look at the clock and it was 4 in the morning. And I was going, shit, 4 in the morning. I started this at 6. I've had nothing to eat. Gotta get to bed. I've got to get up in the morning. And then in bed, waking up 3 hours later to go to work. Yeah, that happened a lot. Guild Wars, that happened in. And Guild Wars 2 to an extent. There have been probably many, many others, Steve. It's a bit hard to remember them, to be quite honest, because they might be even surprising ones, because sometimes, yes, in fact, I can think of one. King's Bounty on the PC, the remake. And that was because of the music. Oh my God. The music in King's Bounty on the PC, the remake. I can listen to it now. It was called Glory Ride. And I gave it to Mainmeister to play in one of his streams he did where he was listening to game music. And I think he got misrepresented on what I was trying to portray, because we were listening to modern music and it wasn't music that you'd make with the PC's own architecture, like sound cards with waveforms and instruments and MIDI and all of that. It was actually an orchestra. But oh my God, was the music in that fantastic. And I think it won an award. Yeah, Glory Ride was the tune. The game was King's Bounty. That was on the PC. That's another one that's not a massively multi-online role-player game that I played at night. I'm going to start talking about Morrowind and that, so I'm going to end it there, Steve. You will have me talking for England and then going off in tangent. So we'll move on. Thank you so much, Steve. My salute to you. Roll on next week, buddy. And we move to Ian. Ian Hill, The Ramblings. He's just put one line. Entertaining video as always. A nice calmist, but hopefully not before a storm. Yes, hope so. Fingers crossed. Definitely on that one. And nice that you watched. Thank you, Ian. I've watched a bit of your channel this week. You've done a couple of videos of note. Mostly, I think there was one, a Carry On one, and another Doctor Who review. Keep those up. Really like those. Jambon. My mate Jambon, and we went to Pinfest. So let's see what he's put today. He might mention it, he might not. Let's have a look. Hi, Del. Thanks for another excellent vlog. This one was particularly entertaining. The story about that ride you went on almost made me heave. Yes, that's that thing where I was talking about a cage that is inside. What I didn't mention, by the way, the centrifugal force that pushes you against the wall, what they did in the ride was they dropped the floor. So the floor then dropped down and you were pinned with no floor to stand on. And yes, the person was sick and it went all over me. And your comments that wasps are self-righteous insects cracked me up. Speaking of creatures that don't bring us a great deal of joy. Yes, I don't like wasps. I'm sorry, they do have a purpose. Every creature's got a purpose, whether it's food for something else. But I love bees, can't stand wasps. Just one of those things. I think I'd probably, if I was in the States, I'd be saying the same about mosquitoes. Used to love going fishing with my dad and seeing dragonflies. Oh, they're beautiful. Dragonflies. I miss looking at those. Haven't seen a dragonfly in ages. Years. Yeah, gonna have to start going and walking along the canals and rivers, I think, a little bit very, very soon. What were they thinking when they put Claudia Winkleman on the film programme? I'm not a massive fan of Mark Commode, but I think he would have been a better choice because at least he knows his stuff. 100%, mate. Anybody that wants to know what we're talking about, we had a programme in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and even into the 2000s where we review films in a special 40-minute program dedicated to the films that were out that week, filmmaking in general, scoring films, everything. Done by, when I was watching it, Barry Norman. Eventually he was replaced until it was cancelled. YouTube has now taken over most of that. You've got a question. If you don't mind, please, what do you think of the recent true crime phenomena? I know some people have always been interested in this sort of thing, but podcasts and documentaries on serial killers have now gone fully mainstream. Were there any cases over the years that have particularly fascinated you? Or maybe you find the whole thing ghoulish and distasteful. Well, the one thing I can turn around and say is not ghoulish and distasteful to me. It's interesting to me. And I've been interested really since Quincy, where he was a medical examiner, and you've got forensic evidence, and it's the forensic evidence that's helped solve the crime years later. Most we had in the 70s was something like Police 5 on ITV with, his name was Shaw, I think. His surname was Shaw. Ray Shaw, something Shaw. Anyway, where it was a local police thing where were you out and about on the streets on this date where a crime has been committed? If you've got any news, please phone up this police station telephone number. And the same was with Crime Watch. But what you're talking about is cases where they would dissect what happened in relation to the Manson murders, Ted Bundy, the New York Strangler, and we've now got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds that they've now put cases to where people have been shot by their wives, by their husbands, chopped up, buried in the garden, blown the house up, all over jealousy, money, and things like that. In fact, if I remember rightly, Sky's got a channel called Crime. It's all on there. And I'm not fixated by them, but if I can't sleep at night, I'll turn one on and it'll be on and I'll get fascinated in a case and go, "Ooh, didn't hear about that one." And it would always be about a Louisiana axe murderer or something. You know, I don't know what where they come from. Probably called Vicky the Viking or something. They give him a name or something. But they are interesting to watch. And I think that answers that question for you. It's not a boring one, but it's a pretty boring answer. But I do find them intriguing. And as you know, one of the films that I think is very underrated is called Copycat, where it came out at the same time as the film Seven, stars Sigourney Weaver. And she's she's a sort of like a teacher of old murder cases, but she's also got a phobia, so she can't leave her room. And that happened because one of the people that she reports on in her studies tried to kill her at one of her conventions. Yeah, that was a very good film. So we'll move to Colin. Good old Colin. Here we go. A phobia. Right. So wait for it. We're going to have a discussion about what a phobia is. A phobia is an irrational fear that is hard to overcome. What you described are just normal fears, and I strongly suspect you could get used to that. As for thrill rides, I just don't want to go on one. I have no adrenaline addiction, so that's something I can easily let pass. Yeah, I know the difference, Colin. I was deliberating and then came to the end conclusion I don't really have a phobia, right? When somebody asks a question in a structure that says you have a phobia and it's right at you where you need to fill the air with words because it's a blog and silence, because I can do this for a while. Yeah, I've got a phobia, but that doesn't do anything for the blog. So I was deliberating, and I dare say I probably do have a phobia. I just haven't discovered it yet. I mentioned to somebody in a comment um, that this might be a phobia because claustrophobia is a phobia, but I do have a phobia, like a lot of people do, in regards to being buried alive. I would hate the claustrophobic nature of it because you can't move. And I'd hate the fact that I'm going to go down there knowing you're going to die because you're 6 foot under and the air's running out. Yeah, if that's not a phobia, fine. But I'm mentioning things that I think a lot of people have got, like you say, scared of. I'm not great on heights, and I still say that I probably have a height phobia. But do people that can't stand on tall buildings but can go on airplanes really say they've got a phobia then? Question. It's great because I love your deliberation on it, and you're absolutely right. It's an irrational fear that is hard to overcome, and so not really normal fears, you know. But you know, I don't like cramped spaces too much, but I wouldn't say that I'm claustrophobic because I have no problems getting into an elevator with two people more than the number that's allowed for the elevator to be on. And if it broke down, I don't think I'd feel too bad that I was stuck in there because I always feel like there's going to be somebody that'll get us out. And if I was to die, then it would probably be a quick death. I don't know. But that's how I look at that. Time Bandits is an underrated classic. Yes, it definitely is. And I'm glad I take it from that point you like that, Colin. That's brilliant. Collecting is a funny thing. You might have felt a bit of a rip-off, but you do have it now, and it's nicely presented. Yeah, that's when I was showing that Maverick, I think, last week. It is a bit of a rip-off. Um, but we wouldn't have it any other way, I think. It gives us anecdotes later on in our lives. Oh, not much to say this week, but here's a question for you. It might be controversial, so I don't mind if you don't feel like answering. But what are your views on blood sports and such as fox hunting or bullfighting? Right. Okay. No, I haven't talked about it much, and I've lived on farms. Now, that isn't to say I've got then an easy answer for you or one that's specific because I don't. I'm glad that fox hunting got abolished or went through courts anyway. I know it still goes on. New Year's Day is high in dogs and horses going through the fields chasing down a fox. But I find that much less controversial than bullfighting, where the bull is just there to be target practice. It's tormented by, a matador to the point where it's exhausted and then it's just basically speared to death. That's blood sports. That's horrible. That's something I would be glad if it's not going on anymore. I know that in Spain there's always going to be something going on, even if it's outlawed. Do you know what I mean? Going back to fox hunting, it seems cruel, and it is, cutting off the tail of a fox. But most fox hunting is done to a season, or what, one particular day. Um, Foxes can be very detrimental to farms. I will say that. They eat their livestock. They destroy crops. They need to live, but I don't think that they're hunted to extinction. And as cruel as it might be, sometimes a fox hunt is done because they want to chase it off their land because it's killing livestock. So it's one of those weird ones. I used to tell people that I used to go rabbiting with my dad, because I did. And people would look at me as if I was a mass murderer, because my dad taught me my first cartridge based gun that developed into a double barrel. But the reason that we were doing that is the rabbits and hares that we were killing. One, I remember going at one time, we were hunting down because one had myxomatosis. So we wanted to kill that so it didn't spread the disease. And there was another time that was one that was just eating all the crops. My uncle was growing carrots and lettuce, and they just destroyed the field, just absolutely devastated it. There are much better ways of doing it now. You can do something really simple, like get yourself a clove of garlic, mix that with water, and spray it on the leaves. And that's a natural deterrent for certain animals, and definitely insects. I've learnt that the other day, by the way, when I was thinking about my gardening, because ants are killing some of my leaves on my plants. So I hope that I've given you a lot of time here, Colin. And one thing I will turn around and say, it's an absolute pleasure all the time to answer your stuff. Absolutely love it. And I always promote your channel. Your blogs are spot on, because they're not just rants. They're talkings about things that you're passionate about. And I love people that talk about their passions. So please keep it up. And I hope I've given an answer to you. I don't like blood sports is the simple answer. Then we move to Seb's place. Thanks for the kind review, Dale. Great vlog as always is all that he's put, but that's appreciated. Thank you very much, Seb. Yes, I've enjoyed your videos just recently. Keep them coming. Then we've got David's retro games played badly, keeping me company at work as usual. As always, David, thank you very much. Was a great race yesterday. Watched that at work also. I think that's the Formula One. Yeah. I've never heard of This Week in Retro. Oh my God. I think you're doing that tongue in cheek, This Week in Retro. It used to be the RMC, the Retro Man Cave. So I'm going to take that as tongue in cheek. I enjoyed Prey. I am claustrophobic. Love Time Bandits. I haven't watched it for years. Don't recall that trailer. Brilliant. I keep meaning to rewatch Jabberwocky. Anybody that wants to know, these are all separate lines, and what he's talking about here is Jabberwocky is the same thing as Time Bandits and Brazil, as I talked about earlier. Just another rendition of a kiddies thing done by the same director, Terry Gilliam. Top Gun and Maverick are great films, not a bad collector's edition, but I think at £100 it was overpriced. I think nobody can contradict that. Thanks very much, David. Cheers for the company. My pleasure, David. Thank you so much, as always, for the interesting responses to the whole of the blog in nice one little line sentences. We move to Martroid, and my salute to you, David. Cheers, Dal. I'm very relieved indeed to hear that Disney have had a change of heart regarding physical media. Hope they stick with it and inspire others to do so too. Yeah, can't deny that. Time will tell. I haven't seen anything, by the way, in regards to um, what's happening in the UK, but I will. By the way, I'm going to go back in a moment to Denny because I didn't answer his question. Just realised. Um, then we've got, not sure of his name, Danny Jukes. There we go. I had to click on the thing there. Danny Jukes. Yeah. He's put nice video, mate. That's all it's put. But of course, his handle is not the same as his name, so I have to keep looking there. We're getting close to the end now, guys, for the questions. That's great. I don't think there are any more questions, but there are two more to talk out. Wee Baba, who I always will spend time talking about. His channel is fantastic. What an artist. Great person who draws these lovely things digitally, I might add, and gives tutorials. Definitely look for Wee Bob Art. You will not regret it. Great to listen along as always, Dale. Nice to see you unboxing the Top Gun box. Found that pretty interesting. Hope you are doing good. Question for next week. Oh, he's got a question for next week. What would be your favourite post-apocalyptic movie and game from the 80s or 90s? Oh my God. Wee Baba. Just to let you know, love the question, but it's been answered 5 times. But I'll answer it again because it's very, very simple. Post-apocalyptic films are some of my favourite genres, and Denny and I talk about them at length all the time. We talk about the ones in general as follows. We talk about Planet of the Apes. We talk about Blade Runner, Soylent Green, I Am Legend, amongst possibly many others. Post-apocalyptic, I suppose you could turn around and say Logan's Run is post-apocalyptic. Anyway, love those, especially Soylent Green and Planet of the Apes. And games. That's a more difficult one, games. Would you say Wasteland is a post-apocalyptic game on the PC? Yeah, I would. I think. Ooh. Is Syndicate a post-apocalyptic game? I think it is as well, yeah. Definitely. Here's one. Played it to death. Death Race 2000 by SSI. Yes, there was a time where I was playing things like Theatre of Europe, strategy board games that were on PC. There was one called Death Race 2000. Hexagonal board type thing, going across a terrain with counters. Loved it. Not for everybody's taste. Some people would look at it and go, boring. Next. But there's your answer. Was there a game post-apocalyptic? Yes. Death Race 2000 is it. Yeah. SSI. Haven't thought about them in a long time. And then lastly, Colin Thompson. Great vlog, Del. Time Bandits is a great movie. I just watched it a few days ago. Oh, that's great, Colin. It's nice that, either something spurs somebody on to watch it, or, oh, isn't that eerie? He's talking about Time Bandits, and I watched that myself a couple of days ago. Isn't that strange? So that's come to the end of the questions. And I think we're behind now because I've gone off in tangents. So we'll do the watched on YouTube quite quickly. Okay. So as you know, there are two mainstays this week in retro and tech mode. There was no video for Tecmo this week, so that will go by pretty quickly. So we'll just talk about this week in retro. And it was a much better show for me because there was a lot more for me to discuss and shout at the screen at while they were discussing it. The three things that were there were memorable first level games. The second topic was Star Wars Dark Forces to be remastered. And the third one was the Atari 2600 Plus retro console just released. And the first one was the one that meant the most to me, which was memorable first level games. It wasn't really called that in the show, but what they were trying to get at was most people played the first level and didn't play anymore, and why. And I came to the conclusion that the same as them, that there was a time where I got to in my life where I was getting so much content, pirate or otherwise, that I would only play the first level and just never load it back up again. It is impossible to keep up, and that happened an awful lot, and that's what made me a first level whore, I suppose, is if you want to look at it like that. All I ever did was first level stuff. Had to be sort of special for me to want to continue playing. You got an inkling of what the game was going to be, and you just moved on. It was just a weird part of my computer history background. That's not to say that there weren't some stable ones where I just played them to death. So, it's a difficult one to answer, but memorable first level games was an interesting topic, and it brought back memories of Mainmeister, where we used to joke about him and say, level 2, well, my God, you got to level 2, that's impossible for you. Or we'll put that down on the calendar, Mainmeister, that you got to level 2 in this game on this date. All joking aside. So, yeah, I liked that topic. And Star Wars Dark Forces Remastered was interesting, but not that interesting that I think that it was worthy of a chat. Because we've talked remastered a lot. Some people love it, some people hate it. What they were talking about here was Dark Forces on the Amiga, which used to be a PC game. And it looks great. And I'm glad that they've done it because it proves that a machine that wasn't a PC could do it. So, we'll move forward. It was quite an interesting show, definitely worth a watch. LGR. LGR did a 1999 digital camera called the Agfa CL30. And the interesting thing about it was the medium they used wasn't videotape and it wasn't memory sticks. It was zip disks. And we've talked about zip disks before. They hold about 100 meg on a sort of like a floppy, a very hard floppy disk. The ones that came in the camera were circular. So they like little records. You place them in and it just recorded. A format that's dead, didn't last very long. Even the patent, I think, came out later on after the systems had all died that used it. But an interesting show to watch. And you got Movie Collector, who set up his home cinema. He's turned his living room into a cinema with all the chairs removed and the proper chairs that you'd get in a cinema in place. He set up a big screen with the curtains that open and close, up and down and left and right. He set up the projector and put a hole in the wall so that the light shines through. Everything. Go and watch that. Absolutely brilliant. And it must have cost him thousands to do that. Centre of Computing History. This was an interesting one because it's not new. It came up in my recommendations. It was filmed about 8 years ago. It had Ben Dalglish and Archer McLean in it. And they were talking about what made the Commodore 64 special. Brilliant documentary. Lots of insights in there. One that I'm going to save, I think, and probably watch again. Because I don't like things remaining on YouTube. So stuff like that I like to try and get myself. Then there was a bloke called Terry Reid, and I'm mentioning his name. Reid, by the way, is spelled R-E-I-D. And I mention his name because he did a segment of setting up Visual Pinball X on your PC, which I recommend if you're having listened to what I said and how simple it is. If you want to make it simpler for yourself, type in Terry Reid, and you'll see that his tutorials for setting up virtual pinball are there. And then we've got Cult of Mush. Yes, I mentioned him because he put in fave games on sale this week. I do like these shows that say welcome back to the show. There's another sale that's just started and you can get this and it costs this much money and it's a rip-off because it came out 3 months ago and it was cheaper than that and all that sort of stuff. But that ends the questions. Absolutely marvellous. And then we get to your YouTube. So we'll just go quickly through these. I'm just going to have a bit of drink. And we'll talk about some of the questions in here. And the first one comes from Down the Rabbit Hole. They're not questions, sorry, they're the site reviews. So he's been very busy this week, Down the Rabbit Hole. He did a couple of videos. Both were fully entertaining. First one was Spy Hunter with a Mad Cat's wheel. Yes, he's bought one of these force feedback, play on your lap wheels, and he's putting them into consoles and seeing whether they make the game better or not. He found that in this particular instance, Spy Hunter suffers. It's not working at all, really, very well. But the one that it did work on was Road Blasters, another arcade game. But that was interesting, definitely worth a watch. And then he talked about Star Trek, and we did a sort of like a little bit of a brief history. I gave him some extra information, which I'm sure he knows the answer to. Okay, and that is that Leonard Nimoy batted for Nichelle Nichols and George Takei to come onto the show when they were rejected as being voiceover parts. But he also batted for Nichelle Nichols to get the same money regardless of gender. Brilliant that he managed to do that. And I mentioned lots and lots of other things as well that they're not discrepancies in this video, just more background information. So I'm just going to pause the video for a moment and then come back because I started to feel a little bit giddy. Won't be a moment. Just do a jump cut. There, that was a simple little jump cut. Feel a little bit better. I don't know if that looks a bit refreshed, but literally I've been gone 1 minute. So we finished with Down the Rabbit Hole because we talked about Star Trek. Robert's Retro Gaming, he's been very, very busy. He played his Minecraft. He does two sorts, Play and Exile. He's up to episode 90 of Play and episode 63 of Exile. Although, as I always state at the end of this, he's probably done another 2 since I wrote this down, and I wrote this last night. So he did a couple of 8-bit gameplays. One was called Labyrinth, one was called Zybex, and one was called Ixion. Zybex was one that was interesting because I've seen it many, many times. It was also been played on Mainmeister's channel. It's a very, very cheap game, $2.99. One of these very small Mastertronic type. I think it was done by Zeppelin in this particular instance. It's like a Nemesis, Gradius type game. I found the Atari one to be very, very singular colour, but quietly detailed. And the Commodore one a bit more colourful, which is strange because the Commodore one should be less colourful than the Atari when you consider its palette. But for the money, you can't quarrel. And I believe, Robert, you did do another video this morning, but I haven't watched it. So that means I'll have to put it into my next blog. But for all these people that are going to be discovering your channel, if they, hopefully, after watching my blog, then I hope that they appreciate what you do, because it's great. LFC Gamer and Vlogs did a blog in the middle of the week He was stuck in traffic. So he talked about that. Then there were some pickups that he discussed, and then there were some questions that he asked me, and unfortunately I wrote them down, and then I lost a bit of paper. So let's see if quickly I can find it. Oh, of course it's in his video though, isn't it? I know one of the questions, and I'm gonna text answer the other two, right? And it'll be it deserves a section. This it was, what album do you think, and it could be a single, is overplayed and overhyped? I remember that as a question. That's going good because it was 4 or 5 days ago when I watched his blog. So sorry, NFC Gamer, that I forgot that. Right, here we go with my answer. And it's not a popular answer, and I'm going to get strung up for it. But to me, Dire Straits, what's it called? Is it, got the album name. Yeah, Money for Nothing. Yeah, 1985, Money for Nothing. Yeah, it's the album is called Brothers in Arms. Is was a fantastic album at the time, and it was everywhere. The MTV video was there. It mentioned MTV in certain songs in that album. It was computer generated, looked like some square boxed lumberjack worker, all of this sort of stuff. What you have to understand from my point of view is that I have a sister, first of all, and I was traveling to work, and sometimes I'd have to listen to something, and I bought that album and played it and thought it was great, but then it just kept getting played and getting played and getting played. I'd walk into a store and that was in the background. I'd step into an elevator and that would be playing. I don't know, traveling down the car, and I'd be listening to the radio, and that would then be they'd be playing that album, and then documentaries would start coming on, and the history of MTV, and what would be mentioned, Dire Straits in that video, and on it goes, on and on and on, to the point where I start to resent the album itself and the band, and that's a shame because there was good there, but it's tarnished now. So if I ever want to, whenever somebody says, "Is there an overhyped album, an overhyped song?" when it comes to mind, many other people will have things like Pink Floyd mention it being mentioned, or you know, similar type bands. But to me, it'll be Dire Straits every time. Shame, because I really did like it. And I'm so sorry that I can't remember what the other two questions were. Oh, it would have been about physical media as well. I'll definitely not lose the bit of paper this time. See, look, I write everything down, but I didn't do it on the pad that I was doing my blog on. So I don't know what I've done with it. Oh, that's embarrassing. Okay, we then move on. So apologies, NFC. You are going to be top of my list for the future. Ponder, brilliant channel. Hasn't done a blog, but I think it's coming up this week because it's the first week of the month. But he did his Gyrus High Score Kerfuffle. If anybody wants to know what Gyrus is, it's an arcade game, and he knows from our discussions and chats that it's one of my favourite arcade games. All it is a little spaceship that circles around a whole circular, like black hole whirlpool type thing in space. the creatures like Space Invaders fly towards you, then round, and then eventually stay within the sort of like circle. You're constantly firing inwards. But it plays Bach's Toccata and Fugue in D minor in the background, but it's the Sky edition, which is a favourite album of mine. Classical piece with played with band instruments like electric guitars and drums and so forth. So that brought back many memories watching him play Gyrus. And then Main Meister himself did his Sunday stream and a slightly different waffle. Yeah, and I think it worked out quite well. He talked about all the stuff that he normally does, what's going on in his life, but then started to reminisce about autumn and started playing music and then started to do some gameplay as well. And he liked the mismatch of all of those things that happened in that video to the point where he thinks he might have a new format. And that's brilliant if that happens. When somebody of that stature brings out a channel and basically then discovers something that he thinks he can revitalize and make something new again, go for it. That's what I say. But I have to go back now to my friend Denny, because I don't think I answered this question. Basically, it was about Tobe Hooper, who died literally 5-6 years ago. The interesting story I have about that is that Tobe Hooper did the Texas Chainsaw Massacre as a film, and that was a big part of my teens because I had that film on Betamax and I had it on VHS, and it was one of those movies that looked so bad it looked almost like it was done with a camcorder. But its historic nature of being in the film archives proves its worth in its horror genre. I loved Poltergeist, and he directed that. But later on, he did, which is with Carol Ann basically, and the building houses on Indian burial grounds. That's what Poltergeist generally is all about. But Life Force came along, and that intrigued me because I love space, and it was about Halley's Comet, and it was about an expedition going to Halley's Comet, landing on, the a part of the comet that would allow you to do some surveys, and bringing back creatures that turn out to be very vampiretic in nature. And some great makeup, definitely worth looking at. And I was speaking to Rock God last night, and he mentioned a film called Funhouse, which I'm going to purposely make sure I see this week, along with another movie that I promised I would watch for Mark, and Down the Rabbit Hole, and his Big Lebowski that he wants me to review. So I'm going to look at that at the same time. But my favourite will be Salem's Lot. It always will be. Salem's Lot was a great book, don't get me wrong. But the 2-part 3-hour David Soul Vampire Fest was great. And it had that influence on me at the time. The music was great. It was a 2-part thing on TV. There was these kids that were involved, and you had a floating ghost at the window tapping to come in. All of that sort of stuff. And the Dracula character was not like Christopher Lee's Dracula. It was more Nosferatu. So I'm glad I came back to that, Denny, to answer your question, because I'd have felt bad if I hadn't got that sorted for you. And we've come to the end of the questions, and we're up to the media stuff. Brilliant. Okay. And I must admit, I do apologise if my eyes were starting to glare over. There isn't a lot that's arrived this week, but there's a huge amount coming next week, I believe, because I've been charged for 2 already, which I don't think are released until Monday. So that means I'm going to be one of the first early adopters of those coming through. These film vault type films where they've taken an old film, putting in these new boxes, made them a complete set, but they put so many extras and so forth in them that I'm really looking forward to it. But the stuff that's arrived this week, twofold. Weird Science on 4K, which is a bit disappointing in regards to the picture quality because there's a lot of grain, but is still worthy of having in your collection. You might want to get rid of your Blu-ray, or you might want to stick with your Blu-ray if you bought last year's version and not upscale, because there isn't that much of a difference. The HDR colors are noticeable, but the grain is far more irritating in this particular pressing. And then the next thing is another one of my omnibuses. This time it's Iron Man, and it's all the issues from 1962. They are issues 39 to 83, plus well, I'll take it like this. It says connecting Tales of Suspense 39 to 83 and Tales to Astonish 82. So what happened was Marvel introduced characters that they thought wouldn't be able to hold up their own book. They paired them with characters and sold them as two individual stories in the same comic. So Iron Man only had 13 pages and Spider-Man's 26. So you can understand Iron Man's importance a little bit here, because all of the stuff that you've been watching has mostly been around the early stuff. And that's the end of that. So we're going to then bring up some media footage. So we're going to go down to game recording. Media playback. There we go. And we're going to play some video clips. This time not of Weird Science, because we'd done that a couple of weeks before. But we are going to play some media clips of stuff I've watched this week. And then I'm going to come back and possibly play a bit more, just a little bit more. So these are all films I watched this week. Most of them I really, really loved, and I hope you do too. So I'm going to turn the audio off of my mic and catch you on the other side.
The year 2000. America is a vast speedway. People line the streets to witness the greatest drivers on Earth in a race from sea to shining sea.
This is a death race.
You finish first, or not at all. Death Race 2000. Every car a deadly weapon. Every spectator a potential point. It's a cross-country road wreck, and the traffic is murder.
Who are you, anyway?
Frankenstein. National hero. Best driver on Earth.
I don't want you to die.
He was built by the world's finest surgeons to drive the fastest car ever designed, and nothing can stop him now. Death Race 2000, rated R.
Is this trip business or pleasure?
Pleasure, I hope.
Welcome to the United States.
Hamer Reinhardt, sometimes called Wolfgar. Born Frankfurt, Germany, 1946. Educated Paris and Patrice Lumumba University, Moscow. Currently self-employed. Occupation, international terrorist.
You are to be indoctrinated in counter-terrorist techniques.
Deke De Silva, age 35. Born and raised New York City. Honorable discharge, U.S. Army, 1972. 52 registered kills. Occupation, cop. One man can bring the world to its knees. and only one man can stop him. Universal Pictures presents Sylvester Stallone in Nighthawks, coming in April.
I could always buy a bottle. Fifth of scotch.
What do you want me to do? Just step out in the alley? Is that it?
Big John, do you think this boy is a hustler? Sausage, rack him up.
Eddie, look, I've got troubles, and I think maybe you've got troubles. Maybe it'd be better if we just leave each other alone.
I got my things over at the hotel. I'll bring them over, lady. Come here.
I'm not sure. I don't know.
Well, what do you want to know? And why?
You're hearing a rain check, and I know it. You're hanging on by your nails. Let that glory whistle ring out loud and clear for Eddie, and you're a wreck on a railroad track. Your horse had finished last. Now, don't make trouble, Miss Ladybug. Live and let live. While you can.
You tell your boys they better kill me, Bert. They better go all the way with me. Because if they just bust me up, put all those pieces back together again, and then so help me. So help me God, Bert. I'm gonna come back here and I'm gonna kill you.
It's coming from the deep, dark recesses of the mind of Mel Brooks. I love him. Young Frankenstein.
Sky means business.
Young Frankenstein.
Oh dear, nothing left. What shall we throw in now?
Starring Gene Wilder as Dr. Frankenstein.
That's Frankenstein. But what about your grandfather's work, sir?
My grandfather's work was doo-doo!
Peter Boyle as the monster. Marty Feldman as Igor.
My grandfather used to work for your grandfather.
I'm sure we'll get along splendidly. Oh, sorry.
Cloris Leachman as Frau Blucher.
You played that music in the middle of the night! Yes! To get us
into the laboratory.
Yes!
And it was you who left my grandfather's book out for me to find.
Yes!
So that I would...
Yes!
Then you and Victor were...
Say it. He was my boyfriend!
Carrie Gar as Inga.
Would you like to have a roll in the hay? Roll in the hay.
Kenneth Mars as the inspector. And Madeline Kahn as Elizabeth.
Where am I? Calm down. What are you going to do to me? I'm not afraid of you. Listen, I have to be back by 11:30. I'm expecting a very important call.
Kill the monster! Storm the castle! And spend See Mel Brooks' Young Frankenstein.
Yes, I think we could all use a good laugh.
But don't see it alone. Don't miss Young Frankenstein, personally directed by Mel Blazing Saddles Brooks, in black and white. No offense.
Yeah, a couple of great ones there. Now, when it comes to how I watch my things, I watch things on disc and I watch things on TV. Young Frankenstein, The Hustler, and Nighthawks are from my own personal collection, but they are, I believe, scattered about on certain channels like Netflix and Prime and all of those sort of things. Death Race 2000 this week was on, I believe, Legend, or it could have been on Talking Pictures or Great Films. One of those. It was on late at night and I watched it, and it was weird because I hadn't watched Death Race 2000 in quite some time, and it was a Sylvester Stallone film as well as David Carradine. And then I watched Nighthawks and realised, my God, that's Sylvester Stallone. What's going on? And that's it, sort of like seems to happen to me, because last week it was Donald Sutherland. Weird. The Hustler is just a classic. It's probably was the most boring of the trailers out of the four. But Jackie Gleason as Fats, my God, the pool game at the end. It's a drama piece in much the same way as like 12 Angry Men is a drama piece. It's not flashy. It's not full of sets. It's talky. It's a talky film. But it's a great one. It's well shot. It's black and white. There's shade. There's depth to the characters. And there's a good reason why they remade it, The Colour of Money, years later on. Definitely one of those classics that you have to watch. And Young Frankenstein just speaks for itself. Parodies. Love parodies. Mel Brooks. King of parodies, probably. And so that sort of like ends it there. But thinking about it, there is something else. I was having conversations, like I said, with my friends, Denny and Rock God. It was actually just last night with Rock God. What a great character. He's always cheers me up in my lows. Like I say, this year I'm hoping good things for him. He needs a good year. It upsets me to hear so much pain when we consider his wife and what he's going through at the moment. But we were talking about theme tunes from our childhood. Remember, we were talking about clapperboard and screen test and so forth. And I happened to bring up a couple of ones that aren't heard very often. So these might bring back many memories for you. And the last one, which I'll only play a snippet of because it'll probably get a copy. All of these might get a copyright, so you'll have to bear with me at the end if you don't hear 4 tunes. Then you know I had a copyright strike and I had to cut it out. But the last one I'll play, I want you to think about where I got that from and what it was used for in the TV program, and then ask yourself, did it fit the program type? So I want to know from you for next week in the comments, just for a bit of fun, what was it used for, the tune? Did it suit the type of program it was in, and what's the name of the program? I don't want to know the name of the track, who composed it, or any of that. It's what it was used for. So I'm going to switch back to media playback, turn off the microphone for me again, and play you 4 tunes. And the last one, as you know, is a special one. These are all from my childhood, and I hope they bring back some memories for you.
Hello.
I'm the storyteller, and my stories must be told. I have many stories, tales for both the young and old. I have many voices to describe many places. Many names have I, and many faces. In Russia I am Ivan, in Sweden I am Jan. In Germany I'm Johann, in England I am John. From my many travels I have gathered these tales to teach you good sense when all else fails. Sometimes there are tears, sometimes there is laughter, but always a happily ever after.
There we go. So the last one is obviously something that's been released as a pop tune in the past, but it was remembered by my dad and me for something totally different as a TV program that we used to watch late at night, or should I say past the watershed. And it's one of those hooks because I play, like to play piano, and it's a piano piece. So it's one of those ones where, oh my God, I forgot all about it. I forgot what the tune was called. These things come back to me and I go, and I've probably mentioned it in my blog before, so you'll have to excuse me. But remember what I was asking for, that last piece. What I asked you, what program it came out of, and do you think it suited that program for the tune? And possibly what your memories of it. I don't really need to know what the tune's called. I know what the tune's called, and I know who composed it. But be interested to know your thoughts. And did any of those tunes that I just played bring back any memories for you? These are just something fun to have for the next blog. And with that, I'm going to say goodbye. It's been a fun one this time, as they all are. But mostly because I think I've answered everything correctly and not too many cock-ups. And for definite, it's a sunny day out there now, and I'm looking forward to the rest of my week. So hopefully I'll have some more content out for you. I hope some of the stuff that I've been bringing out is not alienated any of you. I mean, I know that statues are probably a bit boring. Comics are probably a bit boring. I've tried to keep them down to a minimum, but they are what makes me me, if you see what I mean. So bear with it. Hopefully it'll bring some entertainment. And I dare say when it gets to the end of next week, normal service will be resumed, and you'll only be getting one or two from me again. So hopefully you'll see equally amount of what I've done last week, this week. Don't know yet. It's all still new. And with that, I'm going to say salute, say thank you to all my friends, and thank you for making all my blogs memorable. It's really appreciated. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.